old for video games.
You have failed.
The same way, I will destroy you.
And my friend is truly dead.
Now this is pod racing.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi podcast. I'm Urza Master, sporting a Padawan look. That is Jedi Master Psyllium Maas, and with us, as always, Lord Uther. Today is a day for the Jedi to remember. Ahsoka, Part 6. Far, far away. And let me tell you, my mind was blown on by this episode. I can't wait to talk about it. Fellas, good evening.
Good evening.
We are
Hello there.
fresh on this one. Fresh as a kyber crystal harvested from the earth.
Good call.
The Earth has kyber crystals?
Crap.
Let me know that.
Well,
Anyway,
correct me if I'm wrong, but it's Forrest Whitaker's Earth.
you can leave comments down below that Urza Master is not sure where kyber crystals come from, so hit subscribe, and then go ahead and leave comments, all that you want, and then we'll apologize profusely after that.
Yeah, you just blow me up in the comments. Urza, you're in your galaxy far, far away.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Whatever, nerds.
You're not a Star Wars fan. I'm going to take your
You're
Star
not a
Wars
real
card away.
fan.
Yeah.
You're one of them Gungans. Anyway, so we have, of course, a momentous occasion. For the first time ever in the Star Wars universe in terms of the film franchise, we are literally going where no man has gone before.
That.
And to give us some background on that, Jedi Master Psyllium Maas, take it away.
Well, thank you, Master Uther. Thank you, Master Urza, Master. And thanks to everyone at home, both here, abroad, and in galaxies too numerous to count. We will get to the episode title, which has already been dangled before us, in just a moment, because one of the joys of episode 6 of Ahsoka was how that title was weaved cleverly into the narrative. The director of this episode is Jennifer Getzinger, and of course the writer, as has been the case in all episodes, is Dave Filoni. Miss Getzinger has a long-time established television director, first time in the Star Wars universe, but has contributed to Netflix's Daredevil, HBO's Westworld, Marvel's Agent Carter, and AMC's Mad Men are amongst her numerous credits. And she brought, I think, of all the directors here, I think of what Bryce Dallas Howard has done with The Mandalorian. And that's not just talking about her gender, but that sense of Star Wars beyond just action or intrigue, but that sense of, again, wonder and surprise and even cute. George Lucas is famous for saying on the set of Return of the Jedi, especially when dealing with the Ewoks, dare to be cute, because he knew that it would engage the audiences that he wanted to make sure stayed attached and emotionally involved, young people who are, again, looking for fantasy and adventure and so forth. And so Star Wars has a long tradition with the Ewoks, with the Gungans and Jar Jar Binks, with BB-8, the droid, the ball droid in the new trilogy, of trying to create things we haven't seen before and doing so in a way that make them cute and cuddly and are killers on the toy shelves when they eventually hit the merchandising plush. So, and we've got plenty of those to go over as well. This episode begins with our only glimpse of the title character, Ahsoka. So if you tuned in thinking we were going to get an Ahsoka full episode, I leaned over to my partner and whispered just before it started, I bet they spend most of the time with the bad guys in this one, and I bet you that she's just going to be in the Purgo for most of the episode. And that turns out that's exactly what happened. But Hu Yang and her are still in the mouth of the beast, and we get a fantastic shot almost 30 seconds in of the Purgo moving through hyperspace, and hyperspace between galaxies is re-realized with added bursts of color. And it's just, again, whether it's on the big screen or the small screen, it's a take your breath away visual effect moment. It just says right away from the episode, wow. And we cut to them in the cockpit of the ship, and they're doing a little back and forth. Ahsoka reveals that Sabine willingly went with Balin and Shin Hati and Morgan Elsbeth into the great unknown, and that it was a selfish choice that could endanger the entire galaxy if Thrawn returns. And they have a debate about whether, she made the only choice she could, given her perspective, and so on and so forth. And it's a nice little philosophical moment. And so to reassure her, Ahsoka asks Hu Yang to tell her a story. Now, when she was being trained at the Jedi Temple, Hu Yang was not only a lightsaber instructor, he also provided education, tutoring, classroom work with the Padawans, and he would often teach from the History of the Galaxy, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And Ahsoka replies, well, of course, volume 1 was the best. And you can insert your Star Wars A New Hope joke here, or The Phantom Menace if you lean towards the prequels, or The Force Awakens if you prefer the more recent trilogy. But in any event, Hu Yang agrees to tell her a story, and he begins it with the classic blue crawl that makes everybody stand up and cheer every time a new Star Wars film, at least in the Skywalker saga, has emblazoned onto the big screen a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, which is the episode title of Episode 6, Far, Far Away. We arrive, the bad guys and their hyperspace ring, their giant hyperspace ring, into a galaxy that we've never seen before. And millions and millions of miles from the worlds and systems that we are familiar with. I don't know how you measure it in parsecs, but it's probably a lot. And there is a world waiting for them, Peridea, and it looks like a little bit like Saturn, a little bit of a washed out Saturn, and it's got a ring surrounding the planet. And as they get closer, we see that the ring are thousands and thousands of Purgo corpses. It is the graveyard of these space travelers. And apparently part of their migration is to go back and forth between galaxies where they eventually end up here in orbit. And so it was just, it's a quick moment, but if you watch it or rewatch the episode, it sends chills down you, seeing that this entire ring is just, whale bones and whale corpses floating about. The planet Peridea is not much more hospitable, kind of washed out wasteland, the sort of a desert without sand. There's not really a lot of vegetation. It looks sort of rocky and hostile. Not a place you'd want to pitch a tent. Great place to hide out, which is what the Night Sisters of Dathomir apparently have been doing. In one of the episode's first surprises, we see Star Wars' version of the Bene Gesserit from Dune. These are Force Sith witches. We've seen them in the animated series, The Clone Wars. We've seen them in Rebels. We've seen them in comics, and we've read about them in the books. This is one of the first times we've seen them in live action, and they are creepy. With their pale faces and their blood red robes. One of them is played by actress Claudia Black, who was the female lead in the sci-fi network classic Farscape from about 20 years ago. See if you can spot her. But these Dathmari witches, they use the Force to foretell the future, much like the evil witches of Macbeth. And they also have other sinister powers. You will recall that one of Morgan Elsbeth's Confederates earlier in the show was an Inquisitor named Merrick, that Ahsoka sliced in two back in episode 4. And when she did, a violent explosion of green smoke emerged from his armor, suggesting that he was actually a reanimated, corpse or spirit or apparition. That's Force Witch magic right there, folks. And I have a feeling that we haven't seen the last of that type of sorcery, so to speak. So put a pin in that, and we'll keep our eyes open. They also have this great restraining. They don't use wrist binders in this galaxy. They have a great, almost like a magic lasso type, held by 3 orbs, which reminded me of the balls from Phantasm as they float around you and then bind you. I thought that was great. It's interesting that when Balin and Morgan and Shin bring Sabine down to the planet's surface and we see these Night Sisters, they recoil. They identify Sabine as a Jedi. Now, we've spent a lot of time on this podcast saying that Sabine is as far from a Jedi as you could possibly get, and yet they sense something about her enough to want to lock her up and throw away the key for a while. And if you'll note, Balin seems a bit uncomfortable with that. You wonder if he is struggling with where he goes and what his mission is. And this is the first episode of the 6 where we really get a sense of what Balin is searching for, even though we can't really put our finger on exactly what it is he wants. He identifies something that we've talked about, that many Star Wars fans have debated over the years, the idea that these things are repeating, that time in the universe is like a cycle, right? So you have the High Republic, in which the Jedi were benevolent peacekeepers, only to be brought down by, a darkness. And then you have the Jedi that we've seen in the prequel films, only to be undone by the Sith and the rise of the Empire, only to be undone by the rebellion, which gives birth to the New Republic, which then falls to the first. So over and over and over, these repeating seesaw transfers of power and knowledge and so forth. And Balin announces to his apprentice that he wants to break that cycle once and for all. And anyone who can, there might be unimaginable new knowledge to be gained and new authority. And so he hasn't articulated yet specifically how he intends to do this. And we know that the First Order will rise in approximately 20 to 25 years from the timeline of this show. So, but it's fascinating that he's addressing, and Dave Filoni as the writer, they're addressing something sort of head on that many armchair pundits have debated, this idea that Star Wars is just telling the same story, throughout the generations over and over. So let's put a pause in the recap for a second and ask you gentlemen this idea of Balin and sort of like, what he may be up to, and whether you agree that this idea of breaking through the classic formula could lead us to new exciting places.
Well, a wise man once said, the day destroys the night. Night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side. I'm really hoping we see something like that here. I would love to see this sort of misdirection, because I think the whole time you're kind of expecting these are just sort of corporate stooge Sith. But you can definitely tell there's a deep divide between them and the witches, and definitely between them and Thrawn. And while they're playing a part, I think Thrawn knows better than to trust them. I think the witches are sort of a misnomer at this part, but I really think there's something to be said about where they may be headed. Now, I have a feeling Balin will not make it to whatever conclusion they are aiming towards, unfortunately because of the passing of the actor,
Ray
but
Stevenson. But his apprentice.
Ray Stevenson, rest in peace, but his apprentice, who I still am pushing for a light and dark, like, yin-yang romance between her and Sabine Wren, I think there's a real strong argument here for a Grey Jedi introduction. And I don't know that, of course, we're going to see this come to fruition here, but I think this may lay the bricks for the foundation, or the pipes, if you will, for the foundation towards this future where Rey is going to be maybe the catalyst which unleashes this, the Force Unleashed, if you will. I don't know. It's interesting because I think the whole time I've felt that there's something more here than they're just sort of the bad guy stooges, you know, the new sort of Sith apprentices to the Emperor kind of thing. It felt different. I can't put my finger on how it's going to go, which is kind of exciting. Usually in these Star Wars stories, it is cyclical, and you can kind of tell who's going to be who and what's going to unfold to what. They're not really highbrow when it comes to the writing. They're pretty on the nose, pretty, you know, tell a very cogent story, have some cuteness. I'm really excited to see what those two are doing. I have a feeling they have a bigger part to play than any of the other characters at this point.
And I want Lord Uther to be the first to describe his feelings, reactions, impressions of the introduction of a character that we've so far only been heard discussing in episodes of The Mandalorian and this very show. We can go all the way back to 1991 and a blue hardcover, which is probably still both on our bookshelves. But I think Lord Uther should crack the seal, pop the champagne bottle, as it were, and describe what he thought when finally, after almost 30 years, we saw Timothy Zahn's character step out of the shadows and into the forefront. What'd you think of Thrawn?
Dad bod. But after that, the commanding presence definitely there. The scheming,
The red eyes.
strategery, it's all there. He's probably 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of everyone else, like he should be, because he is Grand Admiral Thrawn, and he is known for that. I do not think I think he sees the Jedi as a means to an end, right? I'm sorry, Balin. I'm not going to call him a Jedi because I'm going to go to that point in a second. But Thrawn's manipulating this whole thing, obviously. He's and I think we're seeing Balin trying to do the same thing too. So it's almost like they're matching wits without completely going at each other. Kind of like a Cold War, like they're fighting a little bit of a battle between each other, but not directly fighting each other. That's the history teacher in me. I also think we're seeing the admittance of Grey Jedi, right? They were calling them Boken, that they're wild, the wild Jedi.
Fascinating theory. What'd you think of that?
I think it's spot on. I mean, it's exactly what it is, and it's the perfect excuse for all of that, right? Like these wild Jedi that aren't trained in a temple, and they kind of take, whether they go through their own trials on their own or whatever it is, or that, you got to kill Vader to finally be a Jedi Master. It's like now we're changing what it takes to be a Jedi Master, where that was really set in stone before. So I think we're seeing the evolution here, and I'm going to take it a step further. Filoni is painting the picture for us, and he's saying the cycle is ending. Like he's running the show. Obviously, this whole thing is in his hands, and I think he's ending this Jedi Sith thing, and he's trying to set that up now because that's what's going to happen with Rey. Right? We're going to get the Grey Jedi. There is no more black and white, and it was interesting because Balin even talks about, and it lines up perfect with the prequels, and I can't believe I keep saying that kind of stuff because it annoys me. But he talks about bureaucracy and how the Jedi were almost blinded by that. Right along kind of lines up a little bit, I think, with what Qui-Gon was getting at, just this whole idea of you can't follow the course all the time. And Yoda's saying it too, right? We've become blind to the dark side because they're so wrapped up in all these other things. So I think we're seeing that happen too. And I also love that we're seeing the mysticism. I feel like the mysticism is back. And it should be, because that's what we've talked about before. This is what Star Wars is about. So with this very broad brush, I think he's not retconning Star Wars like I kind of thought was going to happen a couple times. I think he is painting the future of what Star Wars is going to be. And that's something that's going to appeal to us old men, well, at least me and Psyllium Maas. This second kind of younger guy right here, this Urza Master guy who's, young and strapping and still likes Star Wars, and it's appealing, I think, all the way back. This is going to appeal to my kids. It's where Star Wars is going to go. It gives me hope for whatever they're going to do with Rey if they follow this. And one last thing, because I know I went on a little bit of a rant. What a massive loss Ray Stevenson is, because he was. I felt like Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens was setting himself up to be just such an excellent bad guy, and that whole thing just whatever happened there. I think Balin is I don't even think he's a bad guy. We're rooting for him. I'm rooting for him, which is kind of weird because you're not supposed to be rooting for people that I think are going to be Sith, but they're really not Sith, and he's even saying that. So there's so much I think, and when I rate this episode, it's not, obviously with all the talking I'm doing about it, it's not going to be surprising when I rate it. I think this episode doesn't just move the story along, it's setting up the movie, because we're obviously not going to see a confrontation. I think this is going to the movie. We're going to have Mando and Boba Fett. We're going to see it all. And at the same time, it's setting up all the future movies and where they're going to possibly go with that. So obviously I was very happy and excited with this episode. So many of the things that I wanted to see are finally going to happen, and I'll stop talking. Even though it's a podcast. You're supposed to talk during the podcast.
I'm going to make you talk some more. Do you think, I mean, a lot of fans are saying, okay, so George Lucas, sold his franchise and went off to live as a hermit like Obi-Wan. Do you feel confident? I mean, you had mixed reactions to the sequel trilogy, and when we get to those films, we can discuss your reactions to it in terms of the creatives and who was writing them and directing them and guiding them. But do you feel confident in Dave Filoni, who started with the animated and is now, he kind of graduated to live action, working with Jon Favreau, and now he's got his own series where Favreau is just kind of like the mentor and it's Filoni's show. Do you feel confident in those two, based on what we've seen thus far from the streaming side, that they can relaunch a big screen Star Wars, franchise, and do you have confidence in them that they understand what makes Star Wars appealing versus, like I say, and I'm not here to bash the sequel trilogy because I really enjoyed it, but as opposed to say J.J. Abrams or Rian Johnson or whomever, do you feel like Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau should be basically calling the shots as far as?
Oh, without it. I mean, the only other person I thought might have been able to pull this off might have been like a Kevin Smith, even though I actually think he could rebuild the DC universe if they would turn it over to him, quite frankly. But Filoni, yes, this is like the next sequels or the next trilogy, he better be running the whole show. I don't know if he is. You would probably know that better than me. But if he's not overseeing it in one way or another, it's going to be a massive mistake, because he's setting up so many great things right now that need to be expanded upon. If you really want Star Wars to take the next step, and by the way, if you listen to the Warp Core podcast, you could hear how we've talked about Star Trek taking the next step and where we think it needs to go. you it's almost like he's saying in this episode, we need to, which he is, right? We need to change the cycle. Because I think he's admitting if we don't change the cycle, this isn't going to work. We don't want to see another Death Star that was a planet that who knows what they're going to make the next Death Star out of, right? We don't want to see those things anymore. And I think
We don't need another Death Star. Sorry.
Yeah, very nice.
Okay, there you go.
So I think we're seeing that here. What do you think, Urza?
So, I'm going to throw something out there. And maybe this is just crazy me picking up on small bits of text that jump out at me. But I feel like knowing what we know from Marvel and knowing what we know from Star Trek and how Strange New Worlds has taken the tiniest chunks of the original series and transformed them into something incredible, I think no word is wasted in Ahsoka. And for this to be a point that Grand Admiral Thrawn brings up, I mean, honestly, I thought it was a pretty pivotal moment in the episode when he talks about the impending arrival of Ahsoka. He mentions that our death and rebirth not a common occurrence among the Jedi. My first thought was, they're bringing back Obi-Wan and Anakin and possibly Luke. Everybody's coming back from the dead at whatever point they can get those actors to play it. Because it doesn't matter. The Force Ghost thing that can traverse the world between worlds through any point in time, this is kind of the moment where those characters could easily be brought back. They have a perfect excuse for how they come back. Alive or dead, alive for a few minutes or alive forever. There's so much they could do. They could bring back literally any character they want, and it's now canon. Like it's just there. And what better thing to do than bring your Obi-Wan back? You know, your Kenobi show did incredibly. Ewan McGregor would, I'm sure, happily come back as Obi-Wan for whatever. And how about that for a redemption story they could tell? Anakin and Obi-Wan come back and resume their old partnership to fight a new battle against an evil that transforms the universe. Maybe it's the Oolong Vong, maybe it's something new. Maybe it's just Thrawn bringing some kind of crazy space magic to the battle. Because obviously there's something more going on between Thrawn and these witches than obviously they've revealed so far, I think. And I think this planet that they're on, why are there only the 3 witches? Why are there not massive cities of witches there? Why are there only a couple? And how come they have this super ultimate nasty black magic power? What else is hiding on this planet? What else is in this galaxy that they're now in? Why does Thrawn want to leave it so bad? Even though he wants to go back and reclaim the Empire, why is his first priority not getting revenge? Why is it getting the hell out of Dodge? There's got to be something more there. And this is the world is their oyster right now. They can literally do whatever they want. What better way to bring together a supergroup than to multiverse it and just bring on your most powerful characters against some crazy new evil that goes beyond even the dark side of the Force?
Uther's got thoughts.
Don't do that.
As soon as you said that word, multiverse.
Why do you? So okay, so are you saying they could do it, or are you saying you think they should do it?
I think they could. I don't know.
Okay, so do you think they should? I think those are two different things.
So they have this opportunity, right? And look, if
bring them back in the present, they're present in a sense.
Yes, in the present.
In this series, or do you mean when Rey?
Well, somewhere down the road.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
Could be somewhere down the road. It could be in this, the tail end of the series, Force Ghosts walk out and now they're not Force Ghosts anymore. And maybe this is that path to immortality Yoda was talking about, and it's now's the time, and maybe they go meet up with Luke, and then they all go back to Force Ghosts again.
It's provocative.
Or, remember, Yoda destroys the ancient texts, right? And that was a weird moment. And it's like, what is this? Or they come back with Rey many years in the future because let's just say there's a temporary defeat of Grand Admiral Thrawn at the end of the series. They think they beat him. But death and rebirth happen all the time, right? They didn't really beat him. Maybe he's a clone. Maybe he's a ghost like we saw in episode 4, and the real Thrawn is manipulating the whole situation so that he can get back undetected. And maybe he's slowly building up his forces with Esposito and the other remnants of the Empire, unbeknownst to the rest of us. And come to find out, 20-odd years in the future, they're ready to launch their new empire. The First Order is a total red herring. And instead of the new empire, you get something totally new. Or maybe Thrawn was intact, and that whole nasty villain that's hiding in this galaxy captured him and are using his knowledge to get to that galaxy and spread their will across that galaxy. And all of our big heroes from the past and present have to unite and, have to get Ant-Man and they have to go attack. I'm just saying there's so much they could do. But, I mean...
Okay, do you want to see that?
Kind of. I mean, if I'm being real, I would love to see Luke Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker whooping some bad guy butt.
That would be
I mean, it would be cool. I have to say. Now, I don't think that's what they're going to do. I mean, it feels like a little too easy, but...
Do you think, but doesn't that, so if you do that, and I'm not, I'm not criticizing, we're discussing, right?
Well, of course.
So don't you, let me rephrase that. I feel that by doing that, that's not, to me, that's not even multiversing in a sense. You're just saying a person never, they're never going to die. They're never removed from the realm. So, do you see what I mean by that?
But only the Force sensitives could come back. So, only the true trained, Jedi could come back.
Right. So Sabine's out of luck if she catches a blaster bolt. So
maybe. Or is she Force sensitive enough? And that's why they're detecting her as a Jedi.
Right. And that brings me to the moment as a quick side. Again, we've seen it now with the cup, and we see it again. This was a terrific Sabine episode, if you like Sabine. Trying to force push her way out of her cell, and the rocks start to tremble, and there's dust and smoke. You're like, oh my God, you see? Well, no, it's Thrawn's Star Destroyer, the Chimera, shake, rattle, and rolling. But again, we're being set up for something. At some point, the blind squirrel is going to find the acorn, and Sabine is going to somehow use the Force. And hopefully we'll be in a moment of great impact, and we'll cheer and not slap our heads and say, oh. But
I'm sorry, but Urza has thrown me off so much. I've got to ask him another question because I'm so distraught right now. I'm just, because if they do this, I don't know if I can watch Star Wars again.
But
so Urza, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen? And here, let me tell you why I'm a little nervous, because you tend to say these things, and we know that Paramount watches us and Disney watches us all the time, and you just seem to have this inside the writer's room, this is going to happen. I mean, part of me wants to drive up to your house and just kidnap you and not let you do this podcast anymore. So I don't want you to give Disney any ideas, because it's going to screw up my Star Wars. So, because I feel like it's going in such a great direction. You guys had turned me away from the dark side to the gray side, or whatever side we're at now. Yes. And now it's like, you might completely turn this upside down. So with all that being said, and what do you think is going to happen?
I think in the series, because we only have 2 left, I think
the series is definitely
you're going to get an extended tease, either for a second season of the show,
agreed,
or setting up the movie, because don't forget, the Jude Law skeleton crew and a potential season 4 of Mandalorian also have to unspool before we get to our big. I don't believe that we're just going to go right from the end of Ahsoka into a big screen film. I think there still needs to be some table setting in terms of the larger universe for that to happen. I think that Thrawn could show up in The Mandalorian season 4, for example, as like, you know, he gets back to the familiar galaxy and then starts creating havoc. I mean, we'll know when they're getting ready to like move to the big screen. It'll be self-evident. I don't know if this is going to just, because the way we think about this, these shows, you know, the Book of Boba Fett featured 2 episodes almost exclusively of The Mandalorian, right? I mean, including Luke Skywalker training Grogu. And people complained about it, but it actually makes sense. Like, it was almost like the perfect comic book, like aside. Like they do that all the time in comic books. They'll take a side character or something and do a whole issue on that. I mean, so I was not bothered by that nearly as much as some of the people who were like, wow, this show's about Boba Fett. So, like I say, even if we don't get a full Ahsoka season 2, like Ahsoka will probably be in Mandalorian going forward, or Skeleton Crew with Jude Law. Thrawn will probably. So we're going to see these characters again before they launch into the multiplex. So I don't think we can expect. I think we're just going to get teased here for the last 2. We're going to set up some conflict. We're going to have some great one-on-ones in terms of dialogue and dueling and things of that nature. But yeah, they're playing the long game here. And let me talk you off the ledge just a second, Uther, and then I'll let Urza chime in. I think what he's proposing would be amazing. I really do. I don't know exactly how much of Heir to the Empire and Zahn's vision that they want to sort of, you know, recanonize and bring back into the storyline there. Because again, don't forget, in 30 years we get the First Order. So I don't think we're going to get Star Destroyers and TIE Fighters, but I don't know. Like he said, I think what excites me about his pitch is it's a blank whiteboard, right? And you can just literally color it in any way that you want, and you don't have to lean on, you know, the foundational.
But you don't think that destroys the stories of Anakin and Obi-Wan? You don't think if you can just pull them out anytime you want and drop them into a scenario, that doesn't mess up their legacy?
I think if you were to do something like that, and again, we're all hypotheticals here.
We are.
I think the characters. I think this was like the break glass in case of emergency thing. I don't think you just have Qui-Gon popping up saying, "Hey, what are you making for dinner?" Like, I think it would be something.
Blue milk, anybody?
That would be amazing, though.
He's like the guest who won't leave. He's just like hanging out. Like, I gotta get to sleep. I gotta get to work. You know, Qui-Gon. You've got to. But my feeling is like if you were, because think about that. Ewan McGregor and a grown-up Anakin, like again having to. We kind of saw it verbally in the Rise of Skywalker, when all of the Jedi, you know, gave Rey what she needed to defeat her grandfather, et cetera, et cetera. So without actually putting them on camera, we had them all whispering to her, like, you know, use the Force, Rey. You are one with the Force. You are the Jedi. You are the light. So no, I don't think it's like completely. I'm not going to confirm or deny that it's where they're going. I just think he's got a really neat. That would just be like a wow. You know,
of course like he does.
Marvel Endgame, you know, Avengers Endgame, you know.
On your left.
Yes. They stuck the landing, right?
Jedi assemble.
We're all gonna be like nervous to some degree until they stick the landing. But right now they're setting up a hell of a jump. And, you know, that's the exciting part, I think, and it's just as hard to do. I mean, hitting a good ending, that's hard, but making us invested and care so that we have arguments and discussions and are like, oh my God, what do I do? That's
especially because they're going to leave us on such a cliffhanger because we know we're not going to get enough. We're not going to get any kind of major battle or anything like that. There's only 2 episodes left.
Right.
I mean, what are they really going to do besides maybe kill off Balin? Is my thought. And then does what's her name want revenge? I mean, I don't know. So I'm sorry I keep doing this, but Urza, I want you to tell me what you think is going to happen, so I can decide if I'm going to be happy or not the rest of the week.
As I sit here with my poop-eating grin, let me say this. I think it's inevitable. I really think they're going to have some kind of tie-in to the World Between Worlds and the whole Let's Inspire Rey thing. Now, I say this for a couple of reasons. So Grand Admiral Thrawn here presents a unique opportunity because he's a very compelling villain. And I think the mysticism that they've brought back into it is a huge, huge good thing. But there's so much, like, gray area, shall we say, unexplored territory, because he's been there for a long time. He wants to get the hell out of there. Even if it means not killing the person who got him stuck there in the first place, an arch nemesis, if you will, he's willing to let that go just to get out of there. That, to me, indicates there's something worse, that, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, at least for now. That's another, that you're not wasting words in a show where you only have 46 minutes to tell what could be absolutely pivotal in moving the franchise forward. So I take that as an indicator that there's something huge, or that they're setting up the possibility of something huge in case somebody comes with a great idea. I don't know that you should have just like all the heroes step out of the shadows like the Ghost Army in the Lord of the Rings. It feels very convenient. It's a little too easy, and I don't think, even though we love those big sort of moments that feel like really good payoffs, I don't think we're going to get that. But I do think you can't deny that audiences would love to see more Kenobi, more Anakin. Anakin's redeemed himself in these performances. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get him in any iteration like a multiverse of madness, but I do think we could potentially see them as future players. And here's what I mean by that. What do we really know of the First Order? Think about that. We know there's a little bit of what is essentially a rebellion left over. It is barely a vestige of the Republic that we see kind of in the throes of, holy crap, what do we do now that the Empire's gone, in this series. What's going on in the rest of the galaxy? Galaxy is a big place. The sequel movies only take place in a pretty small portion.
Right.
And of that, we know there's a First Order, but they aren't Empire level everywhere. There's a small quadrant, maybe, that's affected by this. What's going on in the rest? How do we know that Grand Admiral Thrawn isn't waging war against the First Order? He doesn't want a new empire. He wants a new Thrawnpire. He wants to be the one running it all because he's the only one who knows about the big bad that's on its way, that's going to be here. And maybe they can't take the whale tunnels to get there, but they're going to get there because that's just what they are. They're going to find a way, and he's only got so much time to prepare, and he has to subjugate to get the power he needs to basically hold them off from taking over his galaxy because he feels entitled to it. In that same vein, we have these gray, sort of feral Jedi that are fighting the good fight that may or may not be aware of this threat that's coming at the galaxy. They're just trying to fight off whatever the next threat is. I think that's what we're going to see. Excuse me. I think we're going to see this yin-yang romance between Sabine Wren and Shin. And it may not be those two necessarily, but it's going to be a merging of the light and dark, like we get with Rey, the graying of the Jedi, that makes them not only fight Grand Admiral Thrawn, but this next big bad that we don't even know about yet. And I think that's what they're setting up here.
I can live with that scenario.
There you go.
I just get worried about pulling legacy characters at different points. If you want to go back and tell their story, which obviously that's what they did with Kenobi, right? Like, I can live with that 100%. I didn't get my Luke Skywalker, but I feel like I was getting that Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian in that one episode, and then in Boba Fett. Thank goodness, because that's the only redeeming part of that series. Yeah, we'll argue about that. We'll argue about that another day. So I love that idea because I would like to see Thrawn be the focus of a 3-movie arc. I think that would be absolutely incredible. So I like that idea. I still am of the ilk that Sabine is going to wind up taking over Mandalore, but that's just my feeling on that. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. All right, I feel a little bit better. I just, again, if I have to, if I see Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Anakin, like you said, like come running out of a force tunnel, and they're here to help defeat everyone. I think Filoni's better than that. Does that make sense? Like, I think he's
not
even
going
though
to take that easy way out.
Yeah, well, and I think he pays homage, which we talked about that last week. For all of you that, please go backwards, rewatch all our episodes, invite your friends, have them subscribe, send all these episodes out over the internets. We would love that. But I think, again, Filoni's better, and he pays homage the right way to those things. I just hope he doesn't. Again, I feel like it's so funny because we're really picking out dialogue on this one. And I think that's one reason why I really love this episode so much, because, like you said, in such a short time frame, so many things to me were said that are so incredibly pivotal. I feel like Filoni, again, he's doing that all on purpose. In my opinion, he's doing it on purpose, right? I think this series, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I wasn't feeling this before, I think this series is very purposeful to move Star Wars forward. I think that's what this series, at least for me, my feeling right now, and yes, it's coming off of this episode, is really looking to take Star Wars in a direction that's going to help it continue to be healthy and grow.
I agree.
Some quick hitters here. We should acknowledge that Lars Mikkelsen is the actor and voice of Thrawn. He was literally the voice of Thrawn in Star Wars Rebels. They used him to come into live action, much like they did in The Mandalorian with Bo-Katan. So when you can get the voice talent to jump forward and actually portray it on stage, tip your cap. He's the younger brother of Mads Mikkelsen, and Mads is the villain that you've seen in every franchise in the last 5 years. He was in, he's been a James Bond villain in Casino Royale. He's been a Marvel villain in Doctor Strange. He was a Harry Potter villain. It replaced Johnny Depp as the evil Grindelwald. He was just menacing Indiana Jones this summer in The Dial of Destiny. And of course, he played his one sort of anti-hero, Galen Erso, in Rogue One, designer who slipped in the fatal flaw to the Death Star's plans. So this is his younger brother, Lars, who will be giving us Thrawn. And can you think beyond, let's say, Darth Vader stepping onto the Tantive 4 in Episode 4, coming through with after the stormtroopers have taken the ship? Can you think of a better entrance for a villain than they have Thrawn here, with stormtroopers who look like straight out of Lord of the Flies, and a lieutenant with a gold face?
That was so cool.
Captain Enoch.
That was so cool. Yes.
But just to have him striding through as they chant his name, and they all look like they've been through hell and back, but his uniform is clean and white pressed.
Oh, great point.
Immaculate. I mean, Thrawn would never get get a smidge of dust or dirt on there, granted, but just a fantastic sort of like, okay, you wanted him, here he is. So that was a tremendous moment there. We talked about Sabine, and this is really her episode. She gets to fight off the nomads of Perdia, and handles herself well. Didn't get stabbed in the shoulder, didn't get shot, didn't get captured. It was a nice sequence. She used her Mandalorian tricks. She used her lightsaber, and did so. We had two adorable, in different matters of the word, new races, creatures introduced to us. We had the Howlers, which were at first looked like a really scary kind of rat crossed with a tauntaun or a beast of burden, an Eope. But they gave it a personality. Like, it ran off when Sabine was attacked, and she scolded it for being cowardly. And what a great long shot sequence where she says, "Go, go," and like it, kind of clambers off screen, and then she turns and walks away, and then it's just a still shot of the landscape, and then it comes like a, it was just like, "Oh, please, I'm sorry," and kind of wants to lick her face. Like, I don't know if you can sell it in Toys R Us, if you can find a Toys R Us, but it just, I love how they gave it the personality of a beloved pet, a loyal dog or cat. So that was great. And then we had the Noti, which were the shell-like beings. Someone said clearly Dave Filoni has seen Frozen a few times. The creatures that hide under the rocks, make their own shells, etc. If you got a heavy Princess Leia talking to Wicket in Return of the Jedi feel, I'm sure that was intentional. They don't speak each other's language, but they can communicate with one another. And particularly the symbol, the Rebel Phoenix symbol, gets their attention. And we've spent all this time, and we haven't brought up on the other introduction of this, which is, of course, Ezra Bridger. Now, again, fans of Rebels were absolutely thrilled to A, see that he had grown facial hair, and B, that he was alive. We are missing a lot of key backstory at the moment. We don't know, because when we last saw Ezra and Grand Admiral Thrawn, they were on the bridge of that Star Destroyer, and the Purgils were dragging it into hyperspace and out of the galaxy. So how did Thrawn and Ezra leave things? Obviously, Thrawn, knew enough to send her in the direction in which he was supposed. Why hasn't he turned his lasers on him? We'll probably get a little of that more in the next episode, probably with Ezra explaining to Sabine what he's been up to. But keep in mind, and you didn't see any of that here, and as a fan of Rebels, the actor Ephraim Azadi, he nailed it. Like, he had the voice, he had the attitude. That is the animated character that we're seeing, even if he looks like a bedraggled Jake Gyllenhaal now. He is a much better Jedi than Sabine could ever hope to be, and he's probably as good, if not better, than Ahsoka. Like, he was trained by Kanan Jarrus during the show, and he even had a brush with the dark side, where it was tempted by Darth Maul to explore the dark side. So his powers are formidable. And I would honestly say, this won't be blasphemy, like, he could be as strong as Luke, like, in that respect. So I'd like to see what the show is going to do with him in terms of how that plays off. Because again, right now he's with Sabine. I don't even think he knows that she's been trained by Ahsoka per se. Like, he knows Ahsoka. They interacted on the animated series. But there's a lot we haven't heard yet that I think will come through, I hope. And I'm just as excited to see what they could do with him. Because like I say, if they reach his full potential, then he will be a Jedi to be reckoned with, one of the Boken. So, and I love that concept, this idea that Rey, Ezra, Luke are just, they had to kind of pick it up on their own, and they may be as powerful as temple-trained Jedi. And if you were watching Shin, I know we talked about the Ray Stevenson and how great his performance is. Like, she's curious. She's she doesn't like Sabine, obviously, and she can be very focused on her her bad side. But when she's with Balin, there is this innocence. It's almost like, I want to know what to do next, and she totally, completely, implicitly trusts him. And again, it's a credit to Ray Stevenson and his charisma that you would follow that. And you were talking about, as a villain, that you were really impressed with him, Uther. I just love that even in the duel with Ahsoka in episode 4, like, he's very calm, right? He doesn't throw a tantrum like Kylo Ren does in The Force Awakens, although that was very funny. Let's put it as comic dust. Like, his voice, he isn't a shouter. He isn't a, I compared him to Russell Crowe, I think, when he first appeared, but took completely off. Like, Russell Crowe will bark at you and chew scenery and all this. Ray Stevenson, it is a real shame that we've lost him. Rest in peace, because this is the most underplayed Star Wars villain I can think of, even more so than Moff Gideon, Giancarlo Esposito's warlord. He was still prone to, a little bit of the James Bond speeches and all of that. But I think Balin Skull is fascinating. He just looks like he's got a lot of scars.
I think that's what's great about him and Thrawn, the way they act. That coolness under pressure or in situations like that, in my opinion, comes from being through a lot, right? Urza and I have had a lot of conversations about being measured in what you do, I think he's very measured, and I think that's very apparent. And Thrawn's the same way, which is why you can almost feel them playing this game of chess against each other. I mean, you can almost feel, it's almost palpable that they both are trying to be 3 steps ahead of the other one because they're so used to being like that.
Right.
So I just think that's been something awesome about this series as well, and with that character. Oh.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, well.
Well, I think there's just a lot of interest here, and it's probably a good time to give it our ratings. Unfurl our lightsabers, if you will, and show off to the millions
And millions.
and millions of graying Jedi fans. What did we think of Part 6 of Ahsoka, of the 8-part series, by the way? Remember, 2 episodes left. We expected quite a bit from this episode. Did it deliver? Did it leave us short in some ways? Or did it deliver more than we thought? We'll start with Lord Uther here, because he's had a ride tonight, so let's see what he's got.
Boy. I give this a Yoda green lightsaber beyond anything, and I'm gonna try. And I can never be as good at Urza Master in terms of being in that writer's room and knowing what's gonna happen, but I'm really hoping that this is setting up where Star Wars is going to go. So that's why it gets a Yoda green lightsaber from me. And one last comment to Urza. I would be okay if they plucked Luke out from somewhere just because I want to see my Luke Skywalker. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, and I'm going to go with Squirtle green for this week.
Wow.
So, got to catch them all. So in
Yes.
any event, any fans of the Graying Jedi know that I am a Star Wars fiend, and I just keep getting great content. But so much more so, like, I think the balance that Jennifer Getzinger and Dave Filoni gave us here, like I said, we got intrigue, we got spectacle, but we also got, as we said, those smaller, moments like the Howler. Trying to say he's sorry in his own way to Sabine, and the Noti leading Sabine into their village and seeing the little baby in the hammock. Those are moments that they're part of the Star Wars vernacular. They're part of that language. And it's the recognition that you need those moments just as much as you need Sabine beating on nomads with her Mandalorian tools and her lightsaber and her blasters. Like, this episode, I think, recognized from beginning to end what Star Wars feels like in all of its different, incarnations and so forth, that it was rather successful. It didn't lean too much one way or the other. Because if you had an episode that was enormously cute, I know there was some criticism of The Mandalorian's Jack Black and Lizzo episode from season 3. I mean, sometimes you might push it the other way, where suddenly it's too cute or it's too, precious. But I don't think they misstepped here, and they left the table. They didn't clear away the dishes or anything. The table is set, and so hopefully the next couple of episodes in their 45 minutes, they'll just be able to wow and astound us and leave us wanting more. And isn't that really what the best meals are all about? So, a green for me.
Great way to put it. I'm going to go with the green lightsaber as well. I am also excited to see how this is laying the foundation for the future of Star Wars. I think they've really kicked open a unique door, and there's a lot of different places it could go, which Star Wars, one of the places where I think it's stumbled in the past, is it has been cyclical and telling the same stories and opening a door to something strange, new, worlds we haven't seen before. I love it. I have to say, I ate this episode up. It did feel very Star Wars, and that was good. You got the cutesy, but it was not just like cute for the sake of being cute or silly for the sake of being silly, like a Jar Jar Binks, who Jar Jar himself didn't need to be on the level of comic relief that he was to be the R2-D2 C-3PO we got in the original trilogy, which is what George Lucas really wanted, because you had R2-D2 and C-3PO. And I think, like, in that one movie, you kind of needed a little extra because you didn't have the two together yet. You had to kind of tell their backstory. So I get why a Jar Jar Binks exists. I also get why in this series, if you're kicking open the door to a new frontier of Star Wars, you got to inject a little bit of the innocence. And that was the beauty of A New Hope, was like there was a lot of innocence and innocence lost. And I think, unfortunately, now that we've seen the innocence in the next episode, we're going to get the innocence lost in several respects. I think Sabine is going to have to face down the truth with how she got to the planet, how she accomplished this, and I think the expectation that many will have is that that's going to cause a falling out, and that's going to cause a rift, and that's going to lead to some sort of conflict between these two characters. But, me being in the writer's room, I think we're going to get the flip side. I think we're going to get, I expected this, and I expected what's happening now. I think we're going to get some future sort of knowledge that maybe this planet brings out in folks, which could play into why things have unfolded the way they've unfolded there. I do think the 7th episode is going to be mostly exposition, and I think, honestly, the 8th episode is going to be that sort of cliffhanger conflict. I would not be surprised one iota if Hera and part of the fleet is waiting for Ahsoka's return, and they are met with Grand Admiral Thrawn, and that's our space battle. And on the flip side, I think a lot of whales are going to get killed.
No.
And we're going to see Ahsoka and our heroes stranded on this planet.
Ooh,
And I think that's going to be your cliffhanger.
interesting.
And I think that's where Anakin Skywalker is going to actually play a role in how they get back. And in their efforts to get back, I think they're going to accidentally catalyze the big bad that we all want to see, that's driving Thrawn away. And these witches, that's why they don't have a thriving society there. Is this big bad has resulted in these nomads and these like sparsely populated, and why these natives hide in their shells and move all the time.
Right.
There's purpose. All of this has purpose. So I really feel like we're on the cusp of seeing a classic conflict renewed with the foreknowledge here of, I think that might be the red herring. I think Grand Admiral Thrawn may be a red herring. We might be anticipating this, and it could play out a very great villain story. But I think the ultimate payoff is the future of Star Wars, which is a new villain. Not a dark side of the Force villain, but something more ancient, something that has rivaled the Force, and why Force users left this faraway galaxy to begin with.
Uh-huh.
That is the Force working through me, predicting the future. With that, I say, may the Force be with us all.
And also,
We have concluded our 5th episode of The Graying Jedi. Bold predictions, lengthy discussions, Gungans, Ewoks, and plenty of Star Trek references abound. With that, please let us know what you think in the comments. I really want to know, what do you think is going to happen next? What do you think Star Wars' next move is? Is it a multiverse of madness? Will they take a move that really is only going to piss off Lord Uther, but might titillate all the rest of us? Or is this going to be the break the cycle moment that never was? To set up Rey's moment as an even bigger moment in breaking the cycle that has ebbed and flowed between light and dark for eons and eons? Or is it going to be something totally different? Are these little crab people going to defeat the Grand Admiral Thrawn with rocks and trees and birds and things? Or the whale's going to come in and just eat everybody and have a feast? I don't know. You tell us in the comments. Make sure to subscribe to Pending Rebrand to stay up to date with the Graying Jedi. I am Urza Master. That is Lord Uther. Joining us as always, Jedi Master Psyllium Maas. Thank you, and good luck.